To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Man Behind the Mask. Rob Sullivan had built his life like a fortress, methodical, impenetrable, and designed to withstand any storm. At 52, he commanded respect in every room he entered. His construction empire, Sullivan and Associates, had risen from a single truck and his calloused hands to a multi-million-dollar operation spanning 3 states. But Rob's true strength wasn't in the buildings he erected. It was in his ability to read people, to see their weaknesses, and to remember every slight. Growing up in South Boston, Rob learned early that the world didn't owe him anything. His father, a dock worker who drank away his paycheck, had taught him that lesson with his fists. His mother, God rest her soul, had shown him that loyalty was earned through action, not words. When she died of cancer, refusing charity from anyone, Rob was 16 and had already learned to rely only on himself. That philosophy had served him well in business. He could spot a liar from across a construction site, sense when a contractor was cutting corners, and knew exactly when to apply pressure to get what he needed. His employees feared and respected him in equal measure. They called him the general behind his back, not because he was military, but because he commanded his territory with absolute authority. 23 years ago, he'd met Carol at a company barbecue. She was 25, working as a secretary for one of his subcontractors, with auburn hair that caught the sunlight and a laugh that made him forget his usual suspicion of people. She was different from the gold diggers who usually circled successful men like him, or so he thought. She came from a middle-class family in New Hampshire, had a college degree she wasn't using, and seemed genuinely impressed by his ambition rather than just his bank account. Their courtship was a careful dance. Rob tested her loyalty in small ways, showing up late for dates to see if she'd wait, introducing her to his rougher friends to see if she'd judge him, even pretending financial troubles early in their relationship. Carol passed every test with flying colors. She waited, she accepted, she stayed. When he finally proposed on a beach in Maine, he believed he'd found his partner for life. Carol had given him 2 children, David, now 21 and finishing his senior year at Boston College, and Emma, 19 and studying pre-law at Northeastern. Both kids had inherited Rob's sharp mind and Carol's social grace. David was set to join the family business after graduation, while Emma planned to become the family lawyer, keeping the Sullivan interests protected from within the legal system. Rob had provided well for his family. Their colonial home in Wellesley sat on 2 acres of manicured grounds. Carol drove a BMW, wore designer clothes, and had never wanted for anything. She'd stopped working after David was born, claiming she wanted to focus on being a mother, though Rob sometimes wondered if she'd simply gotten comfortable with the lifestyle his success provided. The only shadow in Rob's otherwise perfect life was his relationship with his older brother, Tommy. 2 years Rob's senior, Tommy had followed their father's path, drinking, gambling, and making excuses. When Rob started his business, Tommy had begged for a job, promising to clean up his act. Against his better judgment, Rob had given him chance after chance, promoting him to site foreman despite his unreliability. Tommy's gambling debts and drinking binges had cost the company money and reputation, but blood was blood. Rob had covered for him, bailed him out, and kept him employed out of a misguided sense of family loyalty. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. Rob was reviewing blueprints for a new shopping complex when the pain hit, a crushing weight in his chest that dropped him to his knees. His assistant, Maria, found him clutching his desk, his face gray with pain. "Call 911. He gasped, and everything went black. Chapter 2. Revelations in Room 314. Rob woke to the sterile smell of disinfectant and the steady beep of monitors. Massachusetts General Hospital's cardiac wing was quieter than he'd expected, with pale green walls and a view of the Charles River that might have been peaceful under different circumstances. The doctor, a serious woman named Dr. Patricia Hayes, explained that he'd suffered a significant heart attack. The damage was extensive but not fatal. He'd live, but his life would need changes. "You're lucky, Mr. Sullivan," she said, adjusting his medication. "Your assistant called the ambulance quickly, and we got you into surgery fast enough to prevent permanent damage." But this is a warning you can't ignore. Your lifestyle, your stress levels, everything needs to change. Rob nodded, but his mind was already racing. Who would run the company while he recovered? How would this affect the Morrison project? Carol would need to understand that he'd have to step back from some responsibilities, maybe let David take on more work earlier than planned. When Carol visited that first evening, Rob was surprised by her appearance. She wore a new dress he'd never seen, a red number that seemed inappropriate for a hospital visit. Her makeup was perfect, her hair freshly styled. She looked like she was dressed for a date rather than visiting her husband, who'd nearly died. "How are you feeling?" she asked, but her attention seemed divided. She kept checking her phone, glancing at the door, fidgeting with her purse. "I'm alive," Rob said. "Doc says I'll need to take it easy for a while. Maybe we should talk about David coming into the business sooner." "Oh, that reminds me," Carol interrupted. "Tomorrow is my birthday party. I know you're in here, but the doctor said you might be able to get a day pass. It would mean so much to have you there." Rob stared at her. "Carol, I just had a heart attack. I almost died 12 hours ago." Her expression hardened in a way he'd never seen before. "If you don't come, I'll file for divorce." The words hit him harder than the heart attack had, not because of the threat itself, but because of the cold calculation in her voice. This wasn't desperation or emotional outburst. This was a plan. "Get out," Rob said quietly. "Rob, get out. Now." After she left, Rob called for his nurse, a no-nonsense woman named Betty who'd been checking on him every hour. "I need you to put my wife on the restricted visitor list. She's not allowed back in here." Betty raised an eyebrow, but made a note. "Your brother Tommy called earlier. Said he heard about your attack and wanted to visit. Should I add him to the approved list?" "Yeah, Tommy's fine. Just not Carol." That night, Rob lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying 23 years of marriage in his mind. Small things that hadn't made sense before suddenly clicked into place. Carol's new interest in fitness classes that ran late into the evening, her sudden need for girls' nights that she'd never mentioned details about, the way she'd been encouraging him to work longer hours, telling him the company needed his full attention. The next morning, Dr. Hayes came in with an expression Rob had seen before, someone about to deliver bad news they weren't sure how to frame. "Mr. Sullivan," she began, then stopped and closed the door behind her. "This is difficult. Yesterday, after your wife left, she spoke with one of our orderlies. She was asking about your condition, your prognosis, but the questions she was asking, they weren't the questions of a concerned spouse." Rob sat up straighter. "What kind of questions?" "She wanted to know about your life insurance policies, whether the hospital had been contacted by any insurance companies, whether there were any legal documents she needed to sign. And she asked specifically whether we expected you to have another attack." The pieces fell into place with crystal clarity. Carol hadn't been asking out of concern. She'd been calculating, wondering if she needed to wait longer, or if this first attack might do the job for her. "There's more," Dr. Hayes continued. "One of our security cameras caught her in the parking lot after her visit. She was on the phone with someone, and while we couldn't hear the conversation, her body language suggested it wasn't a call to family. She was animated, happy even." Rob nodded slowly. "Doctor, I need you to do something for me. I need you to tell anyone who asks that my condition is more serious than initially thought. Tell them the damage was more extensive, that I might not survive another attack." Dr. Hayes frowned. "Mr. Sullivan, that's not true. You're going to recover fully with proper care and lifestyle changes." "I know, but I need some time to think, and I need certain people to believe I'm more vulnerable than I am. Can you do that?" After a long moment, she nodded. "Medical information is confidential anyway. If I choose to be conservative in my assessments to outside parties, that's my professional judgment." Chapter 3, The Doctor's Warning. 2 days later, Rob was reviewing his phone messages when Dr. Hayes knocked and entered with a grim expression. She closed the door behind her and pulled up a chair next to his bed. "Mr. Sullivan, I need to tell you something that goes beyond medical care. Yesterday, I was approached by your wife again. She somehow got past the restrictions and cornered me in the hallway. She wanted to know if you had named a healthcare proxy, if you had a living will, and what would happen if you became incapacitated." Rob's jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her she'd need to speak with the hospital's legal department." "But Mr. Sullivan, you should call the police on your wife because what she asked next crossed a line. She wanted to know if there were ways to trigger another heart attack." She claimed she was asking because she wanted to avoid stressing you, but the way she asked, the specific medications she mentioned, someone had been researching this. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. Rob felt something cold and final settle in his chest, something harder than the damaged muscle that had brought him here. "She's trying to kill me," he said simply. "I can't make that diagnosis, but I've been a doctor for 20 years. I've seen grieving spouses, worried families, people dealing with medical crises. Your wife's behavior doesn't fit any of those patterns." Rob reached for his phone. "Get me Tommy Sullivan. Tell him it's urgent." When Tommy arrived an hour later, he looked genuinely shaken. At 54, Rob's older brother still had the broad shoulders of their father, but years of drinking had given him a paunch and broken blood vessels across his nose. He was sober now, had been for 6 months after his latest DUI scare, but the damage to his appearance was permanent. "Jesus, Rob, you look like hell," Tommy said, pulling up a chair. "When Maria called me, I never thought anything could take you down." "Tommy, I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to keep your mouth shut until I'm ready to move. Can you do that?" Tommy nodded, his face serious in a way Rob hadn't seen since their mother's funeral. Rob laid out everything. Carol's strange behavior, her questions to the doctor, the threat about the divorce, the apparent research into heart attack triggers. With each detail, Tommy's expression grew darker. "That bitch," Tommy muttered. "After everything you've given her. It gets worse. I think there's someone else." Rob explained about Carol's new clothes, her late nights, her eagerness to have him work longer hours. The pattern was clear once you knew to look for it. "Who?" Tommy asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. And Tommy, when I do, I'm going to destroy them both. Not just divorce, destroy. I want them to lose everything that matters to them." Tommy leaned forward. "What do you need me to do?" "First, I need you to go to the house tonight. Tell Carol that Dr. Hayes called you. That my condition is worse than they initially thought. Tell her the next few days are critical, that another episode could kill me. You want her to think you're dying? I want her to get comfortable. People make mistakes when they think they're winning. Second, I need you to start watching her. Follow her. See where she goes, who she meets. Be subtle about it. Rob, I'm not exactly secret agent material. You don't have to be James Bond. Just don't let her see you. Take photos if you can. I need to know who I'm dealing with before I make my move." Tommy nodded. "What about David and Emma? They don't know about any of this." Rob's expression hardened. "No one else knows. Not yet. I need to see how deep this goes first. If the kids are involved. They wouldn't be. David and Emma worship you. Maybe. But I've learned not to assume anything about loyalty anymore." After Tommy left, Rob lay in the dark, planning. He'd built his empire by being 3 steps ahead of everyone else, by seeing opportunities others missed, by knowing when to strike and when to wait. This would be no different. The next morning, Dr. Hayes stopped by during rounds. "Your wife called this morning," she said quietly. "She wanted to know if she could bring you some food from home. When I told her hospital policy didn't allow outside food for cardiac patients, she asked very specific questions about your medications and whether certain foods could interfere with them." "What kind of foods?" "High-sodium items, things that could strain your heart." But again, the way she asked, it wasn't a concerned wife trying to help. It was someone looking for information. Rob nodded. "Doctor, how much longer do I need to stay here? Medically? You could go home tomorrow with proper rest and monitoring. But given what we've discussed, I'm going home tomorrow. Whatever she's planning, I need to be there to see it coming." That afternoon, David visited. Rob's son was tall and lean like his father, with Carol's lighter coloring but Rob's sharp eyes. He'd inherited the best qualities of both parents, and seeing him reminded Rob of everything he had to lose. "Dad, I heard from Uncle Tommy that things are more serious than Mom said. Are you going to be okay?" Rob studied his son carefully. David seemed genuinely worried, with none of the calculation Rob had seen in Carol's behavior. "I'm going to be fine, son, but I might need your help with some things." "Anything. You know that. I need you to keep an eye on your mother while I'm recovering. She's been under a lot of stress with this happening, and I'm worried about her." It wasn't exactly a lie. Carol was under stress, the stress of planning her husband's murder. Of course, Emma and I have been worried about her too. She's been acting kind of strange lately. Rob's attention sharpened. "Strange how?" "Just different. Happier, I guess. Which is weird because you're in the hospital. And she's been going out a lot more, saying she needs space to process everything. Where does she go? I don't know. She just says she's going for drives or meeting friends. But Dad, I don't think she has that many friends anymore. After David left, Rob called Tommy. I'm going home tomorrow. Are you ready? Yeah. And Rob? I've already learned something interesting. What? Carol went out for 3 hours today. She told David she was going for a drive to clear her head, but I followed her. She went to a hotel bar downtown, the Marriott on Long Wharf. She met a guy there. They didn't act like strangers. Rob felt the last piece of his old life crumble away. Did you get photos? Yeah. And Rob, you're going to want to see this. I recognize the guy. Who is it? It's Derek Morrison. From Morrison Development. Rob's blood turned to ice. Derek Morrison was his biggest competitor, the man who'd been underbidding him on projects for the past 2 years, the architect of several deals that had cost Sullivan and Associates millions in lost revenue. And now Rob knew how Derek had been getting his inside information. Tommy, Rob said, his voice carrying a tone his brother hadn't heard since they were kids, back when Rob would plan elaborate revenge against neighborhood bullies. I want you to keep following them. I want to know everywhere they go, everything they do. And Tommy, yeah. This is war now. Chapter 4, The Performance Begins. Rob returned home on a Thursday afternoon, playing the role of a broken man. He moved slowly, held his chest occasionally, and let exhaustion show in his face. The colonial house in Wellesley that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like enemy territory, but Rob had always been comfortable operating behind enemy lines. Carol was the picture of a devoted wife, at least when the children were around. She helped him to the bedroom, fluffed his pillows, and made a show of adjusting his medications. But Rob caught the calculation in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking, the way she watched him for signs of weakness like a predator studying wounded prey. The doctor says you need complete rest, she said, her hand on his shoulder. No work, no stress. I've already called Maria and told her you won't be taking any calls for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Rob let concern creep into his voice. Carol, the Morrison contract. Derek Morrison called this morning, she said smoothly. He heard about your heart attack and wanted to express his condolences. He said he'd be happy to take over the Riverside project if you need to step back. Rob had to use every ounce of self-control not to react. Derek Morrison offering to take over the project that would make or break Sullivan and Associates for the next 5 years. The same Derek Morrison who'd been meeting secretly with his wife. That's generous of him, Rob managed. I think so too. You've been working so hard, honey. Maybe this is a sign that you should slow down, let other people handle some of the burden. That evening, after David and Emma had returned to their respective colleges, Carol made dinner, a pasta dish loaded with salt and rich cream sauce, exactly the kind of meal Dr. Hayes had warned him to avoid. She served it with a concerned smile. I know the doctor said to watch your diet, but I thought you might want something comforting tonight. Rob ate small portions and complimented the food, all while noting how carefully Carol watched for his reaction. When he excused himself early, claiming fatigue, she seemed pleased. From his bedroom window, Rob watched Carol in the garden below, talking animatedly on her phone. Even from a distance, her body language was clear. She was excited, maybe even celebrating. After the call ended, she sat on the garden bench for several minutes, and Rob could swear he saw her smile. Around midnight, when Carol thought he was asleep, Rob heard her moving around downstairs. He crept to the top of the stairs and listened. She was on the phone again, her voice low but audible in the quiet house. Tomorrow night when the kids are gone. Yes, he seems much weaker. No, the doctor said another episode could be fatal. I know. I can hardly believe it's finally happening. Rob eased back to the bedroom before she finished the call. Finally happening. Whatever they'd been planning, they thought they were in the endgame now. The next morning brought Tommy, playing his role as the concerned brother. He sat heavily in the kitchen chair, his face grave. Rob, I hate to bother you when you're recovering, but we've got problems at the Morrison site. Carol appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand. What kind of problems? Permit issues, Tommy said without looking at her. The city inspector is saying our electrical work doesn't meet code. If we don't fix it by Monday, they'll shut down the whole project. Rob let his shoulders slump. How much will it cost to fix? $250,000, maybe more. And Rob, we don't have that kind of liquid cash right now. Not with the Harbor Point invoices still pending. This was all theater, but Carol didn't know that. Rob watched her face carefully as Tommy described their fictional financial crisis. She was trying to look concerned, but he caught the flash of satisfaction in her eyes. Maybe I should call Derek Morrison, she suggested, since he offered to help. No, Rob said firmly, then softened his tone. I mean, not yet. Let me see if I can work something out first. After Tommy left, Carol was notably more attentive. She brought him lunch, asked about his medications, even suggested they watch a movie together. But Rob noticed she kept checking her phone, and twice he caught her staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That afternoon, while Carol was out grocery shopping, Rob made his own phone calls. First to his real lawyer, Harold Steinberg, a sharp-eyed man who'd been protecting the Sullivan family interests for 15 years. Harold, I need you to do something quietly. I want you to review all my insurance policies, my will, any documents that would come into play if I died suddenly. Rob, your heart attack has you spooked, but the doctors said, just do it. And Harold, I want you to look specifically for any ways someone could benefit from my death beyond the obvious. Next, he called his accountant, then his banker, then the private investigator he'd used occasionally for business purposes, a former Boston cop named Ray Kowalski who specialized in digging up information people preferred to keep buried. Ray, I need a complete background check on Derek Morrison. Everything, finances, personal life, business dealings. And I need it fast. This about the Morrison contract. In a way, how quickly can you get me something? Give me 48 hours. By evening, Rob had set several wheels in motion. Now came the hardest part, waiting and watching while pretending to be an invalid. Carol made another elaborate dinner, this time beef Wellington with butter-heavy sides. She seemed almost giddy as she served it, chattering about redecorating the living room and maybe taking a vacation once he felt better. Where would you like to go? She asked. I don't know if I'm up for traveling anytime soon. Oh, I meant, well, maybe I could go somewhere with Emma. Or my sister, just for a few days, to decompress from all this stress. Rob bet she could decompress, probably with Derek Morrison on some tropical beach, toasting their success. That night, Carol's phone rang just after 11. She answered quickly, speaking in hushed tones, but Rob caught fragments. Going according to plan, by Monday at the latest. Yes, he's getting weaker. Sunday morning brought Dr. Hayes for a house call, something Rob had arranged privately. In front of Carol, the doctor examined him thoroughly and pronounced herself, concerned about his progress. Mr. Sullivan, your recovery isn't proceeding as quickly as I'd hoped. I'm going to adjust your medications and increase the monitoring requirements. Is there something wrong? Carol asked, and Rob noted the careful balance in her voice. Concerned wife mixed with barely contained anticipation. His heart is still very unstable. The next few days will be critical. Any significant stress or shock could trigger another attack, and frankly, his heart might not survive it. After Dr. Hayes left, Carol was solicitous to the point of absurdity. She insisted on helping him to the bathroom, brought him meals in bed, and generally hovered like a grief-stricken widow-to-be. But Rob noticed other things. How she kept her phone close at all times, how she double-checked the locks on the doors, how she seemed to be waiting for something. That evening brought the answer. Around 9 o'clock, as Rob pretended to doze in his chair, Carol kissed his forehead and announced she was going to bed early. I'm exhausted from all this worry, she said. I think I'll take a sleeping pill and get some real rest. 20 minutes later, Rob heard her bedroom door close. He waited another 30 minutes, then crept to the window. Carol's BMW was backing out of the driveway. Rob was dressed and in his truck within 5 minutes. The advantage of knowing someone for 23 years was understanding their patterns, their likely destinations. Carol would go to Derek Morrison, either his house in Newton or his office downtown. Rob chose the office first and hit the jackpot. Both their cars were in the parking garage of Morrison Development's glass tower. Rob parked across the street where he could see the building's exit and settled in to wait. He didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, Carol and Derek emerged together, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing about something. They walked to Derek's Mercedes, and Carol got in the passenger side. Rob followed them through the quiet streets to Derek's house, a modern monstrosity in Newton that screamed new money. Through the uncurtained windows, Rob could see them embracing in what was obviously Derek's living room. As Rob watched his wife kiss another man, He felt something cold and final crystallize in his chest. The last vestige of the man who'd once loved Carol Sullivan died in that moment, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Rob drove home and was back in bed before Carol returned at 3 a.m. She crept through the house like a teenager sneaking in past curfew, but Rob was awake, planning. Monday would bring the next phase. Chapter 5, The Web Titans. Monday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather for March in Massachusetts. Rob woke early and made coffee, timing it so he'd be moving around the kitchen when Carol came downstairs. He wanted her to see him up and active, to worry that maybe he was recovering faster than expected. "You're up early," she said, and Rob caught the note of concern in her voice. "Couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about the business, about all the problems Tommy mentioned." Carol poured herself coffee and sat across from him at the kitchen island. "Honey, you need to stop worrying about work. Your health is more important than any construction project." Easy for you to say. If Sullivan and Associates goes under, what happens to David and Emma's education? What happens to this house, to our retirement? For just a moment, Carol's mask slipped, and Rob saw something calculating flash across her face. Then the concerned wife was back. "We'll figure it out. Maybe it's time to consider Derek Morrison's offer more seriously. He has the resources to handle the big projects." "You really think I should call him?" "I think you should consider all your options." Rob nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe you're right. Would you mind reaching out to him?" "I'm not sure I'm up for business negotiations right now." Carol's eyes lit up. "Of course. I could call him this morning. Actually, maybe we should meet with him. Face to face. If I'm going to hand over the biggest contract in the company's history, I want to look him in the eye." Carol hesitated. "Are you sure you're up for that?" Dr. Hayes said. Dr. Hayes said to avoid stress, not to become an invalid. "Besides, you'll be there. If I start feeling bad, you can drive me home." After a moment, Carol nodded. "I'll call him right now." Rob listened from the next room as Carol made the call. Her voice was different when she spoke to Derek, warmer, more intimate. They arranged to meet at Derek's office that afternoon at 2 o'clock. Rob spent the morning making his own calls. First to Ray Kowalski. "I've got some preliminary information on Morrison," Ray said. "Guy's leveraged to the hilt. His company looks successful on paper, but he's been taking on debt to finance expansion. Word is, he needs a big score to stay afloat." "How big?" "The kind of big that your Morrison contract would provide." "But Rob, there's something else. Morrison's been asking questions about you around town, specifically about your financial situation, your business practices, whether you have any vulnerabilities." Rob wasn't surprised. "What kind of questions?" "The kind someone asks when they're planning a hostile takeover. He's been talking to your subcontractors, your suppliers, even some of your employees." "Which employees?" "That's where it gets interesting. He's been in contact with Tommy." Rob felt ice form in his veins. "What?" 3 weeks ago, Morrison approached Tommy at Casey's bar in Southie. Bought him drinks. Asked him about the company's finances, about your health, about family dynamics. Rob hung up and immediately called Tommy. "We need to talk. Now." They met at a coffee shop in Brookline, away from both their usual haunts. Tommy looked nervous, which was all the confirmation Rob needed. "How long?" Rob asked without preamble. Tommy's shoulders sagged. "Jesus, Rob, I didn't know what else to do." "How long have you been talking to Derek Morrison?" "A month, maybe longer." "Rob, you don't understand. I'm in deep shit. The gambling, it's worse than I told you. I owe some very bad people a lot of money." Rob stared at his brother, the man he'd bailed out countless times, the man he'd employed despite his failures, the man he'd trusted with family secrets. "How much?" $150 grand. Morrison said he'd cover it if I gave him information about Sullivan and Associates. "What kind of information?" "Financial stuff. Project timelines. He wanted to know about your health, your marriage, whether you had any succession plans." Rob felt the pieces clicking together. Derek Morrison hadn't just been sleeping with Carol. He'd been planning a systematic destruction of Sullivan and Associates. And Tommy had been helping him. "What did you tell him about my marriage?" Tommy couldn't meet his eyes. "I might have mentioned that you and Carol had been having some problems, and that she'd been asking questions about the business, about what would happen if something happened to you." Rob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "Tommy, you're going to do exactly what I tell you. If you don't, those people you owe money to will be the least of your problems." "Rob, I'm sorry." "Shut up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Morrison and tell him that I'm sicker than anyone realizes. Tell him the doctor pulled you aside and said my heart is failing. Tell him I might not have more than a few days. I can't. You can and you will. Because Tommy, if you don't help me fix this, I'll make sure everyone in Boston knows that Tommy Sullivan sold out his own brother for gambling debts. You'll never work construction again. Tommy nodded miserably. What else do you want me to do? Tonight, you're going to be at the Morrison Development Building. I want you to watch Carol and Derek, see what they do after they think I'm finished. Take pictures, record conversations if you can. After Tommy left, Rob sat in his truck and called Harold Steinberg. Harold, I need you to prepare 2 sets of documents. First, I want a new will that leaves everything to David and Emma, with specific provisions that Carol gets nothing if she remarries within 2 years of my death. Rob, what's going on? Second, I want you to prepare incorporation papers for a new company. I want to transfer certain assets out of Sullivan and Associates before this afternoon. Rob, you can't just. I'm not moving money illegally, Harold. I'm protecting my children's inheritance. And Harold, I want you to be at Derek Morrison's office at 2:30 today. Tell his secretary you're there to discuss the Morrison contract. I want a witness to whatever happens in that meeting. Rob's last call was to Dr. Hayes. Doctor, I need one more favor. This afternoon, I need you to call my wife and tell her my condition has taken a turn for the worse. Mr. Sullivan, tell her I've been having irregular heartbeats and that you're concerned about another attack. Tell her the stress of trying to work is making things worse. That afternoon, Rob dressed carefully for his meeting with Derek Morrison. He chose his best suit but made sure to look tired, to move a little slowly, to seem like a man hanging on by a thread. Carol drove him downtown, chattering nervously about traffic and the weather. Rob noticed she'd dressed up too, a black dress that was both appropriate for a business meeting and, he realized grimly, for a widow receiving condolences. Morrison Development occupied 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. Derek's office was a monument to ego, floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive art, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Derek Morrison himself was younger than Rob had expected, maybe 45, with the kind of artificial tan and perfect hair that screamed personal trainer and cosmetic dentistry. He greeted them both warmly, but Rob noticed how his eyes lingered on Carol, and how she seemed to glow under his attention. Rob, I can't tell you how sorry I was to hear about your heart attack. You look well, though. I'm hanging in there, Rob said, letting exhaustion creep into his voice. Though I have to admit, this whole thing has me spooked. They sat at Derek's conference table, and Rob made a show of being winded by the short walk from the elevator. Derek offered water, which Rob accepted gratefully. I understand you're interested in discussing the Morrison contract, Derek said. I'm interested in discussing a lot of things. My health scare has me thinking about the future, about what's best for my family and my employees. Rob outlined the fictional financial problems Tommy had described, painting Sullivan and Associates as a company in crisis. Derek listened with carefully controlled excitement, occasionally glancing at Carol as if for confirmation. That does sound like a difficult situation, Derek said. But you know, Rob, I might be able to help. Morrison Development has been looking to expand, and your company has assets that could complement our operations. What kind of assets? Well, your client list, your reputation, your existing contracts. With the right partnership, we could ensure that your employees keep their jobs and your family's financial security is protected. Rob let Derek paint a picture of a merger that was really a takeover, of a partnership that would leave the Sullivan family with a minority stake in their own company. Throughout the presentation, Carol asked pointed questions about timelines and legal requirements, questions that a concerned wife wouldn't necessarily know to ask. Just as Derek was outlining the final terms of his generous offer, Rob's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, Dr. Hayes, right on schedule. Excuse me, I need to take this, Rob said, answering the phone. Dr. Hayes played her part perfectly. Rob listened, his face growing pale, asking questions in a weak voice about medication adjustments and monitoring requirements. I understand, he said finally. Yes, I'll come in first thing tomorrow morning. Rob hung up and sat quietly for a moment, as if processing bad news. Is everything all right? Carol asked, and Rob caught the eager anticipation beneath her concern. Dr. Hayes is worried about some test results. She wants to see me tomorrow to discuss adjustments to my treatment plan. Derek and Carol exchanged a quick glance, so fast that someone who wasn't looking for it might have missed it. Maybe we should head home, Carol said. You don't want to overdo it. Actually, Derek said, why don't you two think about my proposal? There's no rush, but given your health situation, Rob, it might be worth considering sooner rather than later. As they were leaving, Rob noticed Harold Steinberg in the reception area, ostensibly reading a magazine, but clearly observing everything. Rob gave him an almost imperceptible nod. On the drive home, Carol was unusually quiet. When they reached the house, Rob excused himself to rest, but instead crept to the window of his study, which overlooked the garden where Carol liked to make her private phone calls. Right on schedule, she appeared with her phone, pacing excitedly as she spoke to someone. Went perfectly. He looks awful, Derek. Really awful. The doctor called right there in the meeting. Yes, tomorrow morning. I think it's almost over. Rob smiled grimly. Almost over indeed, but not in the way Carol expected. That evening, Tommy called with his report from Morrison Development. They met in Derek's office around 6. Carol was there for about an hour. Rob, they weren't just talking business. I figured. What else? I got some audio through the window. They're planning something for tomorrow night. After you go to the doctor. Something about making sure you don't come home. Rob felt that familiar cold calculation settle over him. Tommy, I want you to call Derek tomorrow morning. Tell him the doctor confirmed what you suspected, that I'm dying. Tell him it's a matter of days. And then what? Then we finish this. Chapter 6, The Final Gambit. Tuesday morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching Rob's mood as he prepared for the endgame. He dressed carefully, a dark suit that would look appropriate for either a business meeting or a funeral, depending on how things played out. Carol was up early, moving around the house with barely contained energy. She made breakfast, another heart attack special loaded with salt and fat, and fussed over his medication schedule with the attention of someone making sure every detail was perfect. Are you nervous about seeing Dr. Hayes? She asked. A little. Yesterday's call has me worried. I'm sure it's just routine follow-up, Carol said, but Rob caught the tremor of excitement in her voice. As he was leaving for his appointment, Carol kissed his cheek with what felt like finality. I love you, Rob. No matter what happens. Rob looked into her eyes that had once made him forget his suspicion of the world, and saw nothing but cold calculation. I love you too, Carol. The drive to Dr. Hayes' office gave Rob time to review his plan one final time. Every piece was in place, every contingency accounted for. By tonight, either he would have won completely, or he would be dead. Dr. Hayes was waiting for him with a stack of medical files that had nothing to do with his actual condition. How are you feeling about today? She asked. Like a man about to find out if he's half as smart as he thinks he is. The appointment lasted exactly 90 minutes, long enough for Carol to worry, short enough to be believable. When Rob emerged, he looked shaken and pale, a man who'd just received devastating news. He called Carol from the parking lot. I need to see you and the kids tonight. All of us together. There are things I need to discuss. Rob, you're scaring me. What did Dr. Hayes say? Not over the phone. Can you get David and Emma here by 6? Of course. Rob. 6 o'clock, Carol. It's important. Rob spent the afternoon at Harold Steinberg's office, finalizing documents that would protect his children's future regardless of what happened to him. Harold was clearly worried about his client's state of mind, but he'd known Rob long enough to trust his judgment. If something happens to me, Rob told him, make sure Detective Ray Kowalski gets the package I left in your safe. Rob, what the hell is going on? Justice, Harold. Long overdue justice. At 5:30, Rob arrived home to find both his children's cars in the driveway. David and Emma were in the living room with Carol, all of them looking worried and confused. Dad, what's going on? Emma asked. At 19, she had her father's sharp mind and her mother's beauty, but unlike Carol, Emma's concern was genuine. Sit down, all of you. I have some things to tell you. Rob positioned himself where he could see everyone's face clearly. This afternoon, Dr. Hayes gave me some news about my condition. The damage to my heart is more extensive than we initially thought. Carol leaned forward, her face a picture of spousal concern. What does that mean? It means my time is limited. Maybe weeks, maybe months, but not years. Emma gasped, and David reached for his sister's hand. Carol's reaction was more controlled, a sharp intake of breath, a hand to her chest, all the right moves of a devastated wife. There's more, Rob continued. I've been thinking about the future, about what happens to the business, to all of you. I've made some decisions. Rob outlined his fictional plan to sell Sullivan and Associates to Derek Morrison, to use the money to secure his family's future. As he spoke, he watched Carol's face carefully. She was trying to look devastated by his medical news, but he caught flashes of satisfaction, of barely contained triumph. Dad, there has to be other options, David said. Maybe if you step back from the day-to-day operations. The decision is made, son. Derek Morrison is the best choice to take over. He has the resources, the connections, the experience. When? Carol asked, and Rob noted how quickly she'd gone from devastated wife to practical widow. Tomorrow. Derek and I will sign the papers at his office. I want to get this settled while I still can. After David and Emma left, both of them emotional and confused, Carol sat beside Rob on the couch, her hand on his arm. I know this is difficult, she said, but you're doing the right thing for the family. Am I? Sometimes I wonder if I'm making the right choices, if I can trust the people around me. For just a moment, Carol's mask slipped. What do you mean? Nothing. I'm just tired, scared. This whole thing has me questioning everything. That evening, Carol made his favorite dinner, or what used to be his favorite, before he'd learned it was seasoned with betrayal. She was attentive and loving, playing the role of a devoted wife caring for her dying husband. Around 9 o'clock, Rob excused himself to go to bed early. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. I want to be rested. Carol kissed him goodnight, and Rob caught a whiff of expensive perfume, the kind she wore for special occasions. From his bedroom window, Rob watched Carol in the garden, speaking animatedly on her phone. Even from a distance, her body language was celebratory. She was practically dancing as she talked, and when the call ended, she sat on the garden bench and actually clapped her hands together like a child who'd just gotten everything she wanted for Christmas. Around midnight, Carol left the house, thinking Rob was asleep. She was dressed carefully, black slacks and a sweater that would be easy to move in, comfortable shoes, hair pulled back. She looked like someone preparing for work, not a romantic rendezvous. Rob was dressed and in his truck 5 minutes later. He followed Carol through the quiet streets to Derek Morrison's house in Newton. But this time, he didn't stop across the street. Instead, he parked in Derek's driveway, right behind Carol's BMW. Tommy was waiting in the shadows, just as they'd planned. They're in the living room, Tommy whispered. Been there about 20 minutes. You sure about this, Rob? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Rob walked up to Derek Morrison's front door and rang the bell. The look of shock on Derek's face when he opened the door was almost worth everything Rob had endured over the past week. Derek was dressed casually, jeans and a polo shirt, but his face was flushed with excitement and alcohol. Rob, what are you? How did you? Invite me in, Derek. I think it's time the three of us had a conversation. Derek's living room was a testament to expensive bad taste, all glass and chrome and modern art that looked like it had been chosen by a decorator who charged by the hour. Carol was standing by the fireplace, a champagne glass in her hand, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Hello, Carol, Rob said quietly. Don't look so surprised. You didn't really think I was that stupid, did you? Derek was trying to recover his composure. Rob, I can explain. Oh, I'd love to hear your explanation. But first, let me tell you what I think happened. I think my loving wife has been feeding you information about my business for months. I think you've been planning to take over Sullivan and Associates, probably by waiting for me to die and then swooping in to comfort my grieving widow. That's ridiculous, is it? Because I have to say, Derek, your timing is remarkable. You offered to help with my business just days after my heart attack. You happen to know exactly what financial problems would force me to sell. It's almost like you had inside information. Carol finally found her voice. Rob, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that my wife of 23 years has been planning my murder. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Derek went pale, and Carol's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. That's insane, Derek said. Carol would never. Wouldn't she? Tell me. Derek, what did she ask Dr. Hayes about? What medications were you researching? What food interactions? What ways to trigger another heart attack? Rob pulled out his phone and played a recording. Carol's voice, clear and unmistakable, talking to Derek about making sure Rob didn't come home from his doctor's appointment. The thing is, Rob continued, I'm not actually dying. My heart is fine. Dr. Hayes was helping me set a trap, and you two walked right into it. Derek was backing toward the sliding glass door that led to his patio. Rob, you have to understand, I never meant for things to go this far. How far, Derek? How far were you planning to go? Were you going to slip something into my food? Tamper with my medication? Or were you just going to wait for Carol to do the dirty work while you provided an alibi? We weren't going to hurt anyone, Carol said desperately. Rob, you have to believe me. The only thing I believe is that you're both exactly what I always suspected people were, selfish, greedy, and stupid enough to think you could outsmart me. Rob moved closer to the fireplace, where Carol was standing. You know what the real tragedy is? I actually loved you. For 23 years, I ignored every instinct that told me not to trust anyone, because I thought you were different. Rob, please. But you're not different. You're just another predator who got comfortable and lazy. You started to believe your own performance. Derek had reached the sliding door and was fumbling with the lock. I'm calling the police. Good idea, Rob said. Call them. Tell them about the recordings I have of you and Carol planning my death. Tell them about the financial research you've been doing on my company. Tell them about the insurance policies Carol's been asking about. Rob pulled out a thick manila envelope. Or better yet, let me call them. I've been working with Detective Ray Kowalski for the past week. He's very interested in talking to both of you. The truth hit Derek and Carol simultaneously. They'd been played from the beginning. Every piece of information they thought they had, every advantage they believed they possessed, had been carefully fed to them by Rob. You bastard, Carol hissed, and for the first time, Rob saw the real woman beneath the mask. You manipulative bastard. I learned from the best, Rob said. 23 years of living with you taught me everything I needed to know about deception. Derek finally got the sliding door open and bolted onto the patio. Rob let him go. Tommy was waiting outside, along with Detective Kowalski and two uniformed officers who'd been positioned around the house. Carol sank into a chair, her face pale and defeated. What happens now? Now? Now you find out what it feels like to lose everything that matters to you. Just like you planned for me. Rob walked to the window and watched Derek being arrested in the backyard, his hands cuffed behind his back as Officer Kowalski read him his rights. Rob, Carol said quietly, David and Emma. We'll be fine. They'll be disappointed in their mother, but they'll be fine. You, on the other hand, are going to discover that planning a murder, even one that never happens, is still a felony. As the police led Carol out of Derek's house in handcuffs, Rob felt something he hadn't experienced in years, complete satisfaction. Not happiness, exactly, but the deep contentment that came from a job well done. Tommy appeared beside him, watching the police cars pull away. What about Morrison Development? Tommy asked. Without Derek, his company will fold. I know. I'll be picking up his contracts at bankruptcy auction next month. And me? What happens to me? Rob looked at his brother, the man who'd betrayed him for gambling debts, who'd sold family secrets to an enemy. You're going to work off what you owe me. Every penny Derek paid you, plus interest. You'll do it honestly, at minimum wage, and if you ever so much as look at a deck of cards again, I'll destroy you. Tommy nodded miserably. I understand. No, Tommy. I don't think you do, but you will. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. The headlines in the Boston Globe were everything Rob could have hoped for. Construction executive and wife charged in murder plot. Heart attack leads to betrayal discovery. Local business rivals accused of conspiracy. The story had everything the media loved. A successful businessman, a cheating wife, corporate intrigue, and attempted murder. Rob sat in his study 3 days after Carol and Derek's arrest, reading the coverage while sipping coffee that actually tasted good for the first time in months. The house felt different without Carol's presence. Cleaner somehow, as if a toxic presence had been removed. David and Emma had taken the news about as well as could be expected. Emma had cried for an hour, not for her mother, but for the loss of the family she'd thought she'd had. David had simply gotten quiet and angry, the way he did when he was processing something that challenged his worldview. Dad, David said, appearing in the doorway of the study. Detective Kowalski is here. He wants to talk to you about the case. Ray Kowalski was a compact man in his 50s with tired eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. He'd been patient with Rob's unconventional approach to gathering evidence, partly because it had been thorough and legal, and partly because he understood the desire for justice. "How are you holding up, Rob?" Ray asked, settling into the chair across from Rob's desk. "Better than I have in months." "What's the latest?" "Derek Morrison is cooperating fully. Apparently, facing 25 to life for conspiracy to commit murder has a way of loosening tongues." Rob leaned back in his chair. "What's he saying?" "That the whole thing was Carol's idea. According to Derek, she approached him about 6 months ago with information about your company's projects. She said you were having health problems and that she was worried about the family's financial future. And he believed her? He wanted to believe her. Morrison Development is in worse shape than we initially thought. The guy was 3 months away from bankruptcy when Carol approached him. Your wife's inside information was the only thing keeping his company afloat." Rob wasn't surprised. He'd suspected that Derek's success was mostly smoke and mirrors, built on debt and desperation rather than actual competence. "What about the murder plan?" Ray pulled out a small notebook. "According to Derek, that came later. Carol started asking questions about what would happen if you died, insurance policies, business succession, that sort of thing. She made it sound like academic planning, like she was just being responsible. But it wasn't academic. Not according to the evidence we've found. Carol had been researching heart attack triggers for weeks. She'd downloaded articles about medication interactions, food sensitivities, stress factors that could cause cardiac episodes. And Derek admits she asked him about ways to make your death look natural." Rob felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Did they have a specific plan? They were going to wait until after the Morrison contract was signed, then gradually increase your stress levels while tampering with your diet and medication. The idea was to trigger another heart attack that would look like a natural consequence of your existing condition. And then Carol would inherit everything, including a business partnership with Derek. That was the plan. Derek would buy Sullivan and Associates from your widow at a significant discount, then merge it with Morrison Development. Carol would get a guaranteed income for life, plus a private relationship with Derek. Rob was quiet for a moment, thinking about the systematic nature of their betrayal. What kind of deal is Derek looking at? If he testifies against Carol, the DA might reduce the charges to conspiracy and fraud. He's looking at 10 to 15 instead of life. And Carol? Ray's expression darkened. Carol's not cooperating. She's claiming she was manipulated by Derek, that she never intended to hurt you. Her lawyer is pushing for a plea deal, but the evidence is pretty damning. What evidence? The recordings you made, for starters. Plus, we found the research on her computer, her phone records showing contact with Derek going back 8 months, and financial records showing she'd been moving money into accounts Derek couldn't access. Rob raised an eyebrow. What kind of money? Apparently, she'd been skimming from household accounts for months, building up a nest egg for her new life. We found almost $200,000 in an account Derek didn't know about. So Carol had been planning to betray Derek too, once Rob was dead and the business was sold. Rob had to admire her thoroughness, even as he despised her methods. "There's something else," Ray continued. "We've been looking into Derek's background, and we found some interesting connections." "What kind of connections?" "Remember I told you Derek had been asking questions about you around town? Turns out he wasn't just gathering intelligence for the takeover. He'd been planning to eliminate you as competition for over a year." Ray pulled out a file folder. "Derek Morrison has been systematically targeting successful construction companies throughout New England. He finds a weakness, usually financial problems or family issues, then exploits it to force a sale or merger. How many companies?" "At least 6 that we can prove. His whole business model was based on acquiring established companies at below market prices, then absorbing their contracts and client lists." Rob felt pieces clicking into place. So Carol wasn't his first inside source. Not even close. We found evidence that he'd cultivated relationships with employees or family members at several other companies. Usually, he'd target someone with access to sensitive information and financial problems he could exploit. Like Tommy's gambling debts. Exactly. Derek Morrison was a predator, Rob. He found people's weaknesses and used them. Your wife just happened to be the biggest score he'd ever targeted. After Ray left, Rob sat alone in his study, processing everything he'd learned. Carol hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd betrayed their children, their employees, everything they'd built together. And she'd done it with a calculating coldness that impressed him even as it disgusted him. That evening, Emma came to see him. She'd been staying at her dorm since the arrest, trying to process the reality that her mother was a would-be murderer. "Dad, I need to ask you something," she said, settling into the chair Ray had vacated. "Anything. Did you know? Before the heart attack, did you suspect Mom was cheating?" Rob considered his answer carefully. Emma was 19, old enough for truth, but young enough to be damaged by too much of it. "I knew something was wrong," he said finally. "Your mother had been different for months, distant, secretive. But I thought it was just stress, maybe midlife dissatisfaction. I never imagined she was planning to kill me." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about all the time she encouraged you to work late, to take on more projects. She was always saying the family needed you to be successful. She was setting me up for a heart attack. It's sick. I mean, I knew Mom could be cold sometimes, but this..." "Emma, you need to understand something. What your mother did doesn't reflect on you or David. You're both good people who happen to have a bad parent." "What about David? He's been talking about not coming into the business now." Rob frowned. "What?" "He says he can't trust his own judgment anymore. If he couldn't see what Mom was really like, how can he trust himself to make decisions about the company?" "Tell David I want to see him tomorrow. We need to talk about the future." That night, Rob walked through the house that had been his refuge for over 2 decades, seeing it with new eyes. Every room held memories of Carol, some real, some manufactured for his benefit. The kitchen where she'd cooked meals designed to kill him. The bedroom where she'd slept beside him while planning his death. The garden where she'd made her secret phone calls to Derek Morrison. Rob made a decision. Tomorrow, he'd start the process of selling the house. Too much poison had leaked into its walls for him ever to feel comfortable there again. His phone rang just before midnight. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Sullivan? This is Janet Pierce. I'm Carol's cellmate at Norfolk County Correctional." Rob almost hung up, but something in the woman's voice made him hesitate. "What do you want?" "Your wife asked me to call you. She has something she needs to tell you." "I have nothing to say to Carol." "Sir, she's not asking for forgiveness or trying to get out of this. She says there's something you need to know about your brother." Rob felt ice form in his stomach. "What about Tommy?" "She says the gambling debts were fake. Tommy wasn't in trouble with bookies. Derek Morrison was paying him to sabotage your business from the inside." The phone line went quiet. Rob could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. "Are you there, Mr. Sullivan?" "I'm here." "What else did she say?" "She said Tommy's been working with Derek for over a year. The financial problems at your company, the permit issues, the problems with subcontractors, Tommy was causing all of it. Derek was paying him to create crises that would weaken your company." Rob sat down heavily. "Why is she telling me this now?" "She says she's tired of protecting people who betrayed her. According to Carol, when Derek got arrested, he immediately tried to blame everything on her. She wants you to know that Tommy was in on it from the beginning." After the woman hung up, Rob sat in the darkness of his study, thinking about everything he thought he knew about the past year. The permit problems that had delayed the Harbor Point project. The electrical issues that had cost them the Riverside contract. The subcontractor disputes that had forced them to settle at a loss. Tommy had been there for all of it, had been the one to discover the problems, the one to bring Rob bad news about project after project. Rob picked up his phone and dialed Ray Kowalski's number. "Ray, it's Rob Sullivan. I need you to reopen the investigation. There's more to this than we thought." Chapter 8. Blood and Betrayal. The next morning brought a cold rain that matched Rob's mood as he drove to Tommy's apartment in South Boston. His brother lived in the same rundown neighborhood where they'd grown up, in a 3-story walk-up that smelled of boiled cabbage and broken dreams. Rob had called ahead, told Tommy he was coming by to discuss his work schedule. What he hadn't mentioned was Detective Kowalski parked around the corner, or the recording device in his jacket pocket. Tommy answered the door in a bathrobe, looking like he'd been drinking despite the early hour. His face was puffy with sleep and guilt, and he couldn't quite meet Rob's eyes. "Jesus, Rob, it's barely 8 o'clock. What's so important it couldn't wait?" "We need to talk about Derek Morrison." Tommy went very still. "What about him?" "About how long you've really been working for him." Rob pushed past his brother into the small living room. The apartment was a monument to wasted potential. Empty beer bottles, unpaid bills scattered across a coffee table, a television that was probably worth more than everything else Tommy owned combined. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tommy said, but his voice lacked conviction. Rob pulled out his phone and played the recording Carol had made of one of her conversations with Derek. Tommy's voice was clearly audible, discussing the permit problems at the Harbor Point project and how to make them worse. That's from 6 months ago, Tommy. 6 months before Derek Morrison supposedly approached you at Casey's bar. Tommy slumped into a threadbare armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 54 years. Rob, you don't understand. I understand that my own brother has been sabotaging my business for over a year. I understand that every problem we've had, every setback, every crisis, you were behind all of it. It wasn't supposed to go that far. At first, Derek just wanted information. Small stuff, project timelines, bid amounts, client lists. And you gave it to him. I needed the money, Rob. Not for gambling. I haven't placed a bet in 2 years. For Lisa. Rob frowned. Lisa was Tommy's ex-wife, who divorced him 5 years earlier after one too many drunken binges. What about Lisa? She's sick. Cancer. The same kind Mom had. She doesn't have insurance, and the treatments. Tommy's voice broke. Derek offered me $50,000 up front, plus monthly payments, just for keeping him informed about Sullivan and Associates. Rob felt a flicker of sympathy, then crushed it. So you decided to destroy everything I've built to pay for your ex-wife's medical bills. It wasn't supposed to destroy anything. Derek said he just wanted to be competitive, to level the playing field. But it didn't stop there, did it? Tommy shook his head miserably. After a few months, he wanted more. He said passive intelligence wasn't enough, that he needed me to create opportunities for Morrison development. So you started sabotaging our projects. Small things at first. Delayed deliveries, minor permit issues, nothing that couldn't be fixed. But then Derek got greedy. He wanted bigger problems, more serious delays. Rob pulled out a chair and sat across from his brother. Tell me about the Harbor Point project. That electrical problem that cost us the contract? I caused it. I knew the inspector was coming. Knew he'd find code violations if he looked in the right places. I made sure he looked. And the Riverside project? I told Derek about the environmental issues before we submitted our bid. Morrison Development was able to factor them into their proposal while we got blindsided. Rob was quiet for a moment, adding up the damage. How much has your cooperation cost my company? Maybe $2 million in lost contracts. But Rob, I swear I didn't know about Carol. I didn't know Derek was planning to. Bullshit. Tommy looked up sharply. What? You knew about Carol and Derek. You knew they were planning my death. I never. Rob played another recording, this one from 3 weeks earlier. Tommy's voice was discussing Rob's health, speculating about what another heart attack might do to him, wondering aloud if the stress of the business problems might be getting to be too much. You were setting me up, Tommy. You and Derek and Carol, you were all working together to destroy me. Tommy's face crumpled. Rob, I swear I didn't know they were planning to hurt you. I thought Carol was just having an affair, thought Derek was just trying to take over the business. You thought wrong. Rob stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where they'd grown up. Do you remember what I told you when I gave you your first job? When I pulled you out of that bar where you were drinking yourself to death? You said family was everything. I said family was the only thing you could count on in this world. I said that no matter what happened, we'd always have each other's backs. Tommy was crying now, silent tears running down his cheeks. Rob, I'm sorry. I know I fucked up, but you didn't fuck up, Tommy. You made a choice. Every time Derek asked you for information, every time you sabotaged one of our projects, every time you lied to my face about what was happening, you made a choice. Rob turned back to face his brother. And now I'm making one. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy you. The same way you tried to destroy me. Rob pulled out his phone and called Detective Kowalski. Ray, it's Rob. You can come in now. Tommy's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Rob, please. Did you really think I was going to let this slide? Did you think that because we share blood, because Mom loved us both, that I'd just forgive and forget? The apartment door opened, and Ray Kowalski entered with 2 uniformed officers. Thomas Sullivan, Ray said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, industrial sabotage, and conspiracy to commit murder. As the officers handcuffed Tommy, he looked at Rob with desperate eyes. What about Lisa? If I go to prison, who's going to pay for her treatments? Rob felt that familiar cold calculation settle over him. That's not my problem anymore. Rob, please, she's innocent in all this. So was I. So were David and Emma. So were the 50 people who work for Sullivan and Associates whose jobs you put at risk. As the police led Tommy away, Rob stood in the empty apartment, surrounded by the detritus of his brother's wasted life. On the coffee table, he noticed a stack of photographs, pictures of him and Tommy as children, their parents, family barbecues, and Christmas mornings from decades past. Rob picked up one photo, him and Tommy at ages 10 and 12, standing in front of their first construction project, a treehouse they'd built in their backyard. They had their arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with gap-toothed smiles. He dropped the photo back on the table and walked out. That afternoon, Rob met with David and Emma at his office downtown. Sullivan and Associates occupied the top floor of a building Rob had constructed 15 years earlier, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The space was designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors, all dark wood and polished marble and expensive art. "I have something to tell you both," Rob said, settling behind his desk. "It's about Uncle Tommy." He explained everything: Tommy's betrayal, his cooperation with Derek Morrison, his role in sabotaging the company. David and Emma listened in stunned silence, their faces growing paler with each revelation. "Uncle Tommy was working against us this whole time?" Emma asked. "For over a year. Every problem we've had, every setback, he was behind it." David leaned back in his chair, looking dazed. "I can't believe this. First Mom, now Tommy. Who else has been lying to us?" "Nobody," Rob said firmly. "It's just them. And now they're both gone." "What happens to Uncle Tommy now?" Emma asked. "He'll go to prison. Probably for a long time." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Dad, what about his ex-wife? Isn't she sick?" Rob looked at his daughter, 19 years old, still young enough to believe that innocent people shouldn't suffer for other people's crimes. "Yes, she's sick. Are you going to help her?" Rob considered his answer. Lisa Sullivan had been a good woman who'd made the mistake of marrying a weak man. She didn't deserve to die because of Tommy's choices. "I'll make sure she gets the treatment she needs. But not because of Tommy. Because it's the right thing to do." David nodded approvingly. "What about the company? With both Mom and Uncle Tommy gone, what's our situation?" Rob pulled out a file folder thick with financial documents. "Better than I expected. Derek Morrison's company is collapsing. I'm buying his contracts at bankruptcy auction next week. The insurance money from Carol's fraud will more than cover the damage Tommy caused. And with our competition eliminated, we're looking at the most profitable year in company history." "So we won," Emma said. "We survived," Rob corrected. "Winning would have been if none of this had happened in the first place." That evening, Rob drove to Norfolk County Correctional to see Carol. He hadn't planned to visit her, but there were things that needed to be said, closure that needed to be found. The visiting room was a sterile space filled with plastic chairs and vending machines, monitored by guards who'd seen every kind of human drama played out between these walls. Carol appeared after a few minutes, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look older than her 48 years. They sat across from each other at a small table, speaking through a glass partition via telephone handsets. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Carol said. "I wasn't sure either." She looked tired, defeated in a way Rob had never seen before. The careful makeup and styled hair were gone, replaced by the harsh reality of incarceration. "I heard about Tommy," she said. "Good. Save me the trouble of explaining it." "Rob, I need you to know, I never wanted you dead." "Not really." Rob stared at her. "You researched ways to trigger heart attacks. You fed me food designed to stress my cardiovascular system. You asked doctors about fatal medication interactions. How is that not wanting me dead? I wanted you gone. I wanted out of the marriage, out of the life we'd built. But I didn't want you to actually die. What's the difference?" Carol was quiet for a moment. "I don't know anymore. I've been sitting in here for a week, thinking about what I did, and I honestly don't know what I was thinking." "I do. You were thinking you could have Derek Morrison and my money too. You were thinking you were smarter than everyone else. Maybe. Or maybe I was just tired of being married to a man who never really trusted anyone, who always assumed the worst about people." Rob laughed, a sound without humor. "Turns out I was right to be suspicious." "Were you?" "Because if you'd trusted me, if you'd talked to me about your fears instead of just watching and judging, maybe none of this would have happened. So this is my fault." "No. It's my fault. But Rob, you were never really present in our marriage. You were always working, always planning, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I felt like I was married to a stranger. Rob stood up. I came here to see if you had any remorse, any understanding of what you'd done to our family. I see now that you don't. Rob, wait. David and Emma are good people despite you, not because of you. They'll be fine without you. What about us? Is there any chance? There is no us. There never was. What I thought was love was just a 23-year performance. As Rob walked away, Carol called after him through the glass. Rob, I did love you. In the beginning, I really did love you. Rob didn't turn around. I know. That's what makes this so much worse. Chapter 9. The Price of Loyalty. 6 months later, Rob stood in the offices of Morrison Development, watching as workers removed Derek Morrison's name from the wall. The space would become the new headquarters of Sullivan and Associates, part of an expansion that would make them the largest construction company in New England. The irony wasn't lost on him. Derek Morrison's attempt to destroy Sullivan and Associates had ended up making the company stronger than ever. The insurance settlements, the acquisition of Morrison's contracts, and the elimination of their biggest competitor had created opportunities Rob couldn't have imagined a year ago. David appeared in the doorway, wearing a suit and tie, looking every inch the future CEO of the family business. At 22, he'd matured rapidly in the wake of his family's betrayals, developing the kind of hard-edged pragmatism that Rob recognized in himself. The contractors are here for the renovation meeting, David said. Good. Have them set up in the main conference room. I'll be there in a few minutes. David hesitated. Dad, there's something else. Emma called. She wants to have dinner tonight. She says she has news. Rob nodded. Emma had thrown herself into her law studies in the months since Carol's arrest, determined to become the family attorney who would protect Sullivan and Associates from future betrayals. Both of his children had responded to the crisis by becoming harder, more focused, more suspicious of outsiders. Rob wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. That evening, the three of them met at Rob's new house, a modern fortress in the hills outside Boston, complete with security systems and background-checked staff. The place was everything their old family home hadn't been: clean, efficient, and free of poisonous memories. Emma arrived with a bottle of wine and a smile that reminded Rob of Carol in the early days, before everything went wrong. I have an announcement, she said, settling into her chair at the dinner table. I've been accepted into the prosecutor's office internship program. Starting next summer, I'll be working with the DA's office on white-collar crime cases. David raised his wine glass. Congratulations. Any particular reason you chose prosecution over corporate law? Emma's expression grew serious. I want to understand how people like Mom and Derek Morrison operate. I want to learn how to recognize the signs, how to build cases against them. Rob felt a mixture of pride and sadness. His daughter was becoming a hunter of predators because predators had destroyed her family. There's something else, Emma continued. The prosecutor handling Mom's case wants to meet with us. She's considering offering a plea deal. Rob set down his fork. What kind of deal? 15 years instead of life. She'd have to testify against Derek Morrison, admit to conspiracy to commit murder, and agree to a complete forfeiture of any claim to family assets. What's your recommendation? Rob asked. Emma looked at her father with eyes that had seen too much for her 20 years. Take it. A trial would be a media circus, and there's always a chance a jury might believe her sob story about being manipulated by Derek. 15 years means she'll be 63 when she gets out. Old enough to be broken, young enough to regret. David nodded agreement. I think Emma's right. We've won everything we can win. Now it's time to move on. Rob considered his children's advice. Both of them had become harder, more calculating in the months since Carol's betrayal. They thought like him now, strategically, without sentiment, always 3 steps ahead. I'll call the prosecutor tomorrow, Rob said. Tell her we'll accept the deal. After dinner, as David and Emma were leaving, Emma pulled Rob aside. Dad, there's something else. I've been visiting Uncle Tommy in prison. Rob's expression darkened. Why? Because somebody should. He's family, and despite what he did, he's still David's and my uncle. Emma, he tried to destroy everything I've built. He put your future at risk. I know. But Dad, he's a broken man. Prison has been hard on him, and Lisa died last month. The cancer finally won. Rob felt a flicker of something. Not quite sympathy, but recognition of a fellow human being's suffering. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because he thinks you could have saved her if you'd wanted to. I paid for her treatments through a third party. She got the best care money could buy. Emma looked surprised. You did? Tommy doesn't know that. He doesn't need to know. Lisa was innocent in all this. But Dad, if you helped Lisa, maybe you could. No. Rob's voice was final. Tommy made his choices. He chose Derek Morrison over his own family. He chose 30 pieces of silver over 20 years of loyalty. I won't forgive that. Emma was quiet for a moment. What if he was sorry? What if he genuinely regretted what he did? Then he should have thought of that before he betrayed me. After Emma left, Rob stood alone in his fortress of a house, looking out at the lights of Boston spread below him. He'd won everything he'd set out to win. Carol and Derek Morrison were in prison. Tommy was broken and alone. Sullivan and Associates was more successful than ever. His children were safe and secure. So why did victory feel so empty? His phone rang, an unknown number, but something made him answer. Mr. Sullivan? This is Father McKenna from St. Margaret's. I'm calling about your brother. Rob's blood chilled. What about him? I'm afraid Thomas was found dead in his cell this morning. It appears to be suicide. Rob sat down heavily. How? He hanged himself with bedsheets. He left a note addressed to you. An hour later, Rob stood in the morgue, looking down at Tommy's body. Death had erased the lines of worry and guilt from his brother's face, leaving him looking like the boy Rob remembered from their childhood. Father McKenna handed him an envelope with Rob's name written in Tommy's familiar handwriting. I'll leave you alone, the priest said quietly. Rob opened the letter with steady hands. Rob, I know you'll never forgive me, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I never meant for things to go as far as they did. I was weak, and I was scared, and I made choices that hurt everyone I loved. Lisa is gone now. The cancer took her yesterday. I know you paid for her treatments. The doctor told me an anonymous benefactor covered all her bills. I know it was you. Thank you for that. It's the only kindness I've received in months. I can't live with what I did to you, to the family, to everything Mom and Dad taught us about loyalty. I can't live with the knowledge that I chose money over family, that I betrayed the one person who always stood by me. Take care of David and Emma. They're good kids, better than either of us deserved. And Rob, try not to become so hard that you forget how to forgive. I know you think forgiveness is weakness, but maybe sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do. I'm sorry for everything. Tommy. Rob folded the letter and put it in his pocket. As he drove home through the empty streets of Boston, he thought about forgiveness, about the price of loyalty, about the weight of carrying grudges until they crushed you. When he reached his house, Rob went to his study and pulled out a bottle of whiskey, the good stuff, the kind he and Tommy used to share on special occasions. He poured 2 glasses, set one in front of Tommy's empty chair, and raised the other in a solitary toast. You stupid bastard, he said quietly. You could have just asked me for help. Rob drank the whiskey and thought about his brother, about the treehouse they'd built together when they were children, about the promises they'd made to always look out for each other. Somewhere along the way, they'd both forgotten those promises. The next morning brought reporters, drawn by the news of Tommy Sullivan's suicide and its connection to the Morrison murder conspiracy. Rob met them on the steps of Sullivan and Associates, looking every inch the successful businessman who'd survived his family's betrayals. Mr. Sullivan, do you have any comment on your brother's death? My brother was a troubled man who made some very bad choices. I'm sorry he's dead, but his death doesn't change what he did to my family and my company. Do you feel any responsibility for his suicide? Rob looked directly into the camera, his expression hard and unforgiving. I feel responsible for protecting my family and my employees from people who would betray our trust. My brother chose to work with my enemies. That choice had consequences. Will there be a funeral? That's a private family matter. As Rob walked into his building, leaving the reporters behind, he thought about legacy, about the example he was setting for David and Emma. He was teaching them to be strong, to be survivors, to trust no one completely. But was he also teaching them to be like him, successful but alone, victorious but empty? That afternoon, Rob called Emma. I've made a decision about your uncle, he said. We're going to give him a proper funeral. Family only, but proper. Dad, I thought you said. I said a lot of things. Tommy betrayed me, betrayed our family, and I'll never forgive him for that. But he was still my brother, and he deserves better than an unmarked grave. Emma was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Dad. I think that's the right thing to do. After the funeral, a small service attended only by Rob, David, and Emma. Rob stood alone at Tommy's graveside. The headstone was simple. Thomas Michael Sullivan, 1969 to 2024, beloved brother and uncle. I hope you found some peace, Rob said quietly. I hope wherever you are, you understand that I couldn't forgive you. Not for what you did to my children. As Rob walked away from the cemetery, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a sense of finality. Carol was in prison, Derek Morrison was ruined, Tommy was dead. The war was over, and Rob had won completely. But as he drove home to his fortress of a house, Rob wondered if complete victory was worth the price he'd paid for it. He'd saved his company and secured his children's future, but he'd lost his wife, his brother, and perhaps something essential about himself. In the end, Rob Sullivan had learned the hardest lesson of all, that in a world full of betrayers and predators, the only way to survive was to become something harder and colder than they were. He'd protected everything that mattered to him, but in doing so, he'd become the kind of man who could watch his own brother's funeral without shedding a tear. It was the price of never forgiving, never forgetting, and never trusting anyone completely. Rob Sullivan had won, but he'd won alone. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.